My daughter sold my 1968 Ford F-100 while I was at a cardiology appointment. She told the buyer I was too old to care what happened to some rusty truck. What she didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, I had transferred the title out of my name completely. Not to her. Not to my son-in-law. Not even to myself. I had transferred it to the Evelyn Harper Memorial Trade Fund, a small scholarship fund I started in my late wife's name for kids going into auto repair. So when my daughter sold that truck, she didn't steal from an old man. She stole from a registered nonprofit. And that changed everything. My name is Frank Harper. I'm 68 years old, retired mechanic, widower, and for 41 years, that truck sat either in my garage or under my hands. It was a two-tone red and white 1968 Ford F-100 with a 3-on-the-tree transmission and a dent on the rear bumper that my wife, Evelyn, put there the first week we owned it. She backed into a mailbox outside a diner in 1983 and cried like she had wrecked a Ferrari. I laughed until she threw a napkin at me. That truck was ours before the house was ours. Before our daughter Melissa was born. Before we had decent furniture. Before retirement accounts, and knee braces and blood pressure pills. Evelyn and I restored it slowly because we never had much extra money. A rebuilt carburetor 1 year. New bench seat the next. Paint after I sold a motorcycle I didn't really ride anymore. We didn't finish it all at once. We grew old with it. After Evelyn died from ovarian cancer 3 years ago, the truck became less of a vehicle and more of a place I could still hear her voice. Melissa hated that. She called it that useless thing in the garage. Her husband, Brent, called it dead money. Brent had one of those businesses that was always about to turn a corner. First it was custom phone cases. Then pressure washing. Then crypto consulting. Then a mobile detailing company with no working van and 3 angry customers. Every few months, Melissa would call me with that soft voice she used when she wanted money. Dad, Brent just needs a little bridge loan. I gave them some help after Evelyn died. More than I should have. 5,000 here. 3,000 there. I even paid 2 months of their mortgage once because Melissa said the kids were scared. But I stopped when I found out Brent had spent one of my bridge loans on a jet ski. That was when their attitude changed. Melissa started saying I was hoarding things. She said my house was too big for one man. My tools were just sitting there. The truck was sentimental clutter. 2 weeks before the sale, I attended a fundraiser at the local trade school. Evelyn had volunteered there years ago, helping kids fill out scholarship applications. She loved young people who wanted to work with their hands. That night, I decided to make the truck part of something better than a family argument. I met with my attorney, Dana Wilkes, and transferred the title to the Evelyn Harper Memorial Trade Fund. I remained the custodian and caretaker, but the truck legally belonged to the fund. My plan was to display it at the school's annual car show and eventually auction it, with the proceeds funding scholarships for students going into automotive repair. I didn't tell Melissa. Not because I was hiding anything. Because I knew exactly what she'd say. And I was tired of hearing my wife's memory called junk. The morning it happened, I was sitting in a cardiology office with little sticky pads on my chest, trying not to think about how much I hated waiting rooms. My doctor said my heart was fine for a man my age, but I needed less stress. I almost laughed. When I got home, the garage door was open. At first, I thought maybe I had left it that way. Then I saw the empty space. The oil mat was still on the floor. The battery tender cord was hanging loose. A crescent wrench sat on the workbench where I'd left it. But the truck was gone. I stood there for a long time. Long enough for the neighbor's dog to bark twice and stop. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Dad, before you freak out, Brent found a buyer for the truck. It's better this way. You weren't using it. We'll talk later. Before you freak out. That was how she announced she had sold the last thing I had restored with her mother. I called her. She answered on the 4th ring. Dad, I know you're upset. Where is my truck? It was just sitting there. Where is it? Brent sold it to a collector. He gave us $15,000 cash. Honestly, that's more than fair for something that old. I closed my eyes. You sold property that wasn't yours. She sighed. Please don't start with that. You're too old to be this attached to a truck. Then Brent's voice came from the background. Tell him it's done. He can't drive it anyway. I heard Melissa cover the phone badly. Then she came back and said the cruelest thing she'd ever said to me. Dad, it's a truck. It's not, Mom. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I looked at the empty oil mat and said, You're right. It isn't. She softened, thinking she had won. So you understand? No, I said. I understand exactly what happened. I hung up. The old me might have driven straight to their house and started yelling. Maybe 20 years ago I would have. But grief had taught me something. Anger burns fast. Paperwork burns people slower. I called Dana. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Frank, do not contact them again. Do you have proof they sold it? I have her text. Good. We'll need the buyer. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:42 that evening, a man named Richard Bell called me. Mr. Harper? I bought your Ford today. There seems to be a problem at the DMV. I sat down at my kitchen table. What kind of problem? Well, the title they gave me doesn't match what the DMV has on record. They said the vehicle is registered to some memorial fund. Your daughter said you were ill and asked her to handle it. She said that? There was a pause. She said you were forgetting things? That was the moment this stopped being only about the truck. I asked Richard if he still had the paperwork Brent gave him. He did. I asked him to scan everything and send it to my attorney. He sounded nervous. Am I in trouble? Not if you tell the truth, I said. You may be the only honest person in this transaction. The paperwork arrived that night. Brent had created a bill of sale with my name typed at the top. My signature was at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close enough to fool someone who didn't know me. But Dana knew immediately. Frank, she said the next morning, this is forgery. The bill of sale also claimed the truck was sold by me personally for $15,000. That created another problem for Brent. Because Richard had paid Brent directly. Not the fund. Not me. Brent. Dana sent one letter to Richard, one to the DMV, and one to Melissa and Brent. The letter to Richard stated that the vehicle had been sold without authorization, that the fund was the legal owner, and that he should not transfer, alter, or move the vehicle until the matter was resolved. The letter to the DMV flagged the forged sale document. The letter to Melissa and Brent was short. Return the vehicle and all funds connected to the unauthorized sale within 5 business days, or the fund would pursue civil and criminal remedies. Melissa called me 11 times. I didn't answer. Then she came to my house. I watched her through the front window as she marched up the walkway with Brent behind her, looking less confident than usual. I opened the door but kept the screen closed. Dad, she said, you sent us a legal threat? No, I said. My attorney sent you a legal notice. Brent stepped forward. This is insane. It was your truck. It was not. Melissa's face twisted. You transferred it just to trap us. No, I said. I transferred it to honor your mother. You trapped yourselves. Brent laughed, but it came out thin. Come on, Frank. Nobody's going to prosecute family over an old truck. That's the second mistake you made, I said. You didn't take it from family. You took it from a memorial fund. Melissa went pale. For the first time, she looked scared. Not sorry. Scared. There's a difference. Brent tried one more angle. We used the money for the business. If this gets out, you'll ruin us. I looked at him through the screen. No, Brent. You used my wife's truck to cover your failure. There's a difference. They didn't return the money in 5 days. Of course they didn't. Brent had already used most of it to pay overdue vendor bills and a truck-wrap deposit for his detailing business. So Dana filed the civil claim. The DMV referred the forged document to their fraud unit. Richard cooperated fully and returned the truck voluntarily after learning the sale wasn't valid. That was the part Melissa never expected. She thought the buyer would fight me. He didn't. Richard showed up at the trade school on a Saturday with the Ford on a flatbed. I met him there with Dana, 2 instructors, and a deputy who had been assigned to document the return. When the truck rolled off the flatbed, I had to turn away for a moment. It still smelled faintly like old vinyl, gasoline, and the peppermint gum Evelyn used to keep in the glove box. Richard handed me the keys. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really thought they had permission." "I know," I said. "You did the right thing." The school agreed to store it in their display bay until the annual car show. A group of students asked if they could help clean it up. One young man named Javier ran his hand along the fender like it was something sacred. "My grandpa had one like this," he said. That was when I knew the truck was where it belonged. The consequences for Melissa and Brent came in stages. First, the court ordered them to repay the $15,000 to the fund, plus legal fees. Brent tried to argue he had acted in good faith, because Melissa told him I wanted to sell it. Then Dana presented Melissa's text. "Before you freak out." The judge was not amused. Second, the forged bill of sale became a criminal matter. Brent ended up taking a plea for misdemeanor fraud and forgery-related charges. He avoided jail, but he received probation, community service, and restitution. Third, his business collapsed anyway. Once the local vendors found out he had used forged vehicle paperwork to get cash, nobody wanted to extend him credit. Melissa blamed me for that. She sent one email. "You destroyed our family over a truck." I replied with one sentence. "You tried to sell your mother's memory to save Brent's ego." I haven't heard from her since. The hardest part was my grandchildren. I sent them birthday cards as always. I made sure they knew my door was open to them. I refused to poison them against their mother, even though part of me wanted to tell the whole story. Eventually, my oldest grandson, Tyler, came by. He was 17, tall, awkward, and angry in that quiet teenage way. "Mom said you hate us now," he said. I shook my head. "No. I hate what was done. That's not the same." He looked into the garage, saw the empty spot, and said, "I like that truck." I smiled a little. "Want to see where it is?" A week later, I took him to the trade school. The Ford sat under soft lights near the entrance to the automotive building. The students had polished the chrome. Someone had made a small sign. 1968 Ford F-100. Donated to the Evelyn Harper Memorial Trade Fund. Restored by Frank and Evelyn Harper. Supporting future mechanics and tradespeople. Tyler read it twice. Then he said, "Grandma would have liked this." That one nearly got me. "Yeah," I said. "She would have." At the spring car show, the school displayed the truck with photos of Evelyn and me from the restoration years. One picture showed her holding a socket wrench, laughing with grease on her cheek. That photo stopped people. Not because the truck was perfect. It wasn't. It had flaws. So do all old things worth keeping. But because you could see love in it. The fund raised enough that day to cover 2 full tool scholarships and 3 partial tuition grants. Javier, the student who touched the fender that first day, received the first Evelyn Harper scholarship. When they handed him the certificate, he shook my hand and said, "I'll take care of every car like somebody loved it." That was better than revenge. But I won't lie and pretend the revenge didn't feel good too. Melissa and Brent sold something that didn't belong to them because they thought I was too old, too soft, and too sentimental to fight back. They thought a truck was just metal. They thought paperwork was just a formality. They thought family meant I would swallow anything to keep peace. They were wrong on all 3. That truck now sits where young mechanics can learn from it. My wife's name helps kids buy tools instead of Brent buying time. And my daughter no longer has access to my accounts, my garage, my documents, or my trust. People ask me if I miss having the Ford at home. Sometimes I do. On quiet mornings, I still look toward the garage and expect to see that red fender catching the light. But then I visit the school and see students leaning over the engine bay, asking questions, learning, laughing, building futures with their hands. And I think about Evelyn. She always said a good machine should never sit unused if it could still help somebody. So no, my daughter didn't take my truck from me. She just forced me to put it exactly where it was meant to go.